Do you remember the first time you used Google Maps as a kid? You probably put in your own address, right? What is it about us that, when offered the entire world, wants to see our own tiny patch of it? Or, in the case of Wplace, not just see, but decorate. When a few friends and I were on a call a few days after it came out, we spent the time hopping between the towns and cities that we live in. I think that instinct is pretty common, judging from how many major population centres are crowded while green spaces, oceans, and deserts remain clean. And without doxing myself, when a character from a game I worked on appeared in the middle of the city that I call home, it felt somehow really emotional. That was what prompted me to start writing this, but I've been thinking about this desire to play games in virtual representations of our real homes for a while. Back in May, I wrote an article for The Verge about video games that use OpenStreetMap data to let players build bus routes, farms, railways, and so on across a representation of the planet. The CEO of global pharma developer Therabytes told me that when they showcased the game at Gamescom 2024, quote, every single booth visitor wanted to look at their own house. It is, he suggested, part of the power fantasy of these kinds of games. You might live somewhere, but you can't necessarily shape it in the way you'd like. You might find your local bus route frustratingly unreliable, or you might not like that you're barred from walking through 92% of the country. If you rent, you might not even be able to hang art or paint the walls a colour you like. But in games like Global Farmer, City Bus Manager, and now Wplace, you can shape things. Writing in the 70s, the sociologist Henri Lefebvre argued that space is not simply a thing that exists, but a byproduct of social construction. To paraphrase an example from later anthropological work by Barbara Bender, a certain railway advert showed an arable field with a single tree in the centre, calling it, quote, one of the best shows on earth to be enjoyed from the first-class carriage. There is a certain absurdity to this that Bender, I think, politely doesn't point out. No matter where you sit on a train, you're going to see the same view. But she used the advert to point out how it allied to the political dimensions of the space. This is not the British landscape by chance, it's because of thousands of years of committed maintenance. A field like that must be cultivated, but the work and the workers are hidden from the viewer. There are no hedges, this isn't a small holding, it's an agribusiness, and yet a kind of ancient, wise legitimacy is projected by the single ancient tree in the centre. This tree, of course, has luckily not been cut down by the very rail line that you're currently riding. This is the kind of space you might pass through on any given train, and it's far from neutral. It is, to return to Lefebvre, socially constructed. And in some places the social construction is close to the surface, more tempting to exert our own desire on, even if only digitally. Global Farmer launched with an advertorial line, "Turn Buckingham Palace's gardens into a sustainable farm." It was this that piqued my interest in the first place. Why is this the draw, at least as perceived by the marketing team? Well, like I said, people want to exert some kind of power over where they live, and people want to exert some kind of power over highly politicized spaces. As I wrote for The Verge, quote, tearing down a perfectly manicured gated garden from which the British royal family takes £510 million per year and turning it into land to grow food for a country where 4.5 million children live in poverty might not be a one-to-one political solution, but it is emotionally compelling. As well as major cities, the most active spots on Wplace are those that are the most politically contested. If a space is socially constructed, a map is catastrophically so. Gaza is covered in Palestine flags, and J.K. Rowling's house in trans ones. Obviously, these are positive examples, but this tendency means that decisions need to be made over moderation, and as far as I can tell, Wplace is not great at doing this. As well as broadly not being up to the task of being able to deal with things like hate speech and griefing, the decisions they've made around moderation, and specifically the transmisogynistic harassment of a member of their own team, kind of leaves a sour taste over the whole project. But it's also another vector through which to consider how space, even digital space, is socially constructed. I probably wouldn't give the Wplace people any money. There are arcane microtransactions you can go through to get more pixels to paint with. But what keeps me looking at it is the way people use space when they have the freedom to do anything. There are people being mean-spirited, but scrolling around you mostly see expressions of love everywhere from millions of people who walk down every street and live in every home that you might pass in the physical world. There's been jokes about being unable to move without running into Undertale or Deltarune characters, but it's so compelling to me that people would care about something so much that it would be their first thought to decorate where they live. Or queer flags as a signal that people were there, that people like you live everywhere. And the fact that Gaza isn't just full of Palestine flags, but thousands upon thousands of hearts. People don't often have a lot of power to shape their spaces, but they clearly want to. When they're given the opportunity to do so digitally, they will. They'll find a space that means something to them, and they'll understand that it's something social, and they'll put their mark on it. And more often than not, that mark is an expression of joy, or care, or solidarity.